In a magnificently furnished apartment on Madison Avenue, which Mrs. Elvira Burton had rented for New York's winter season, that augustly beautiful or beautifully august lady sat writing. I may say that she was writing grimly, and that there was Jovian determination stamped upon her high, broad forehead and indented at the corners of her tense lips. She had just returned from a consultation with two matrons of the same stern fiber as herself. No group of gray-bearded physicians had ever weighed the fate of a patient with more attention to pathological detail than had Mrs. Burton and her two friends weighed the fate of Helen Burton. But whereas it rarely happens that pork is prescribed in a delicate case, the results of that petticoated conclave was that hog was prescribed for the flower-like ward of the leader of Omaha's socially elect. While Mrs. Burton had done most of the talking, her two friends who had broken into New York's next-to-the-top layer of society by means of the hyphens with which they coupled the names of their first and second husbands, her two friends, I say, had managed to wedge in a word or two, all in favor of Jabez Hogg. The guardian of the two prettiest girls who had ever debutanted in the Nebraska metropolis emerged from that conference on fire with resolve. She would marry Helen to Mr. Hogg, thus link together the Hogg and Burton millions, and thereby create an alliance that would take its place beside any in the country in the matter of bank account. So confident was she of the power of her will that she did not even remove her wraps before she sat down to answer Jabez Hogg's letter. Nor did she bother to ask her maid if Helen and Sadie had returned from their ride. She did not care to discuss the matter with them. She had decided. It remained only for the weaker wills to yield. Beginning with a regal flourish of the pen, she wrote, "My dear Mr. Hogg, I received this morning your courteous note, begging me to persuade Helen to give you a final answer. It pains me deeply that you should suffer so from her neglect, after all your kindness. I trust that you will forgive it on the score of her youth. She is very young, and her head has been turned with too much flattery. She shall be yours, that I can promise you. When you come on for your annual slaughterhouse directors' meeting, you may bring the ring. I have already given the order for the engraving of the engagement announcements, and I will arrange to give a reception and dance for Helen at the plaza. I do not know how to thank you for putting your French car at our disposal. It has saved us a great deal of annoyance and bother. Helen has spoken often of your thoughtfulness." Mrs. Burton stayed her flying pen and grimly read the last sentence aloud. It was not the strict truth, as she was writing it. Helen had spoken frequently of the convenience of the car, but she had added that she could never ride in it without feeling that she was going to run over a pig and hear it squeal. Mrs. Burton did not waver for more than an instant, however. In a way of speaking, she gripped her conscience by the neck, strangled it, and threw it into the discard. Then she continued with her letter. "I have been looking at houses on the avenue and would suggest that you try and negotiate for the Gladwin mansion. The owner lives abroad, and while it is not on the market, I am advised that the young man would be glad to get rid of it. He is said to be living a fast life in Paris, and while he was left a great fortune, he would probably be glad to get the ready money. I know of no finer home in New York for you to settle down in after your honeymoon. Thanking you again for your constant thoughtfulness, and hoping that you will now banish every doubt from your mind, I remain, faithfully yours, Elvira Burton." The smile with which Mrs. Burton sealed this letter and delivered it to her maid was more than a smile of triumph. It was a positively fiendish smile of victory. End of chapter 10. Recording by Roger Moline.